What happens when immense, potentially catastrophic power is bestowed upon a single individual? What consequences, both intentional and unintentional, can result from one person being entrusted with such high-stakes levels of stewardship? Well, if history tells us anything, it's that when invested with godlike power, mankind is inclined to recklessly wield it with no real grasp of what repercussions their actions may have. Hi there, I'm your host, Mr. Doyle, and this is a great undertaking. This is the first in a three-part series of videos that will be focusing on the stories that comprise the Gwendy trilogy. Today I will be discussing the first story in the trilogy, Gwendy's Button Box, and in the following weeks I'll be covering the sequel entitled Gwendy's Magic Feather, as well as the third most recent and presumably final story in the series, Gwendy's Final Task. Gwendy's Button Box, a brief summary. The little town of Castle Rock, Maine has witnessed some strange events and unusual visitors over the years, but there is one story that has never been told until now. There are three ways up to Castle View from the town of Castle Rock: Route 117, Pleasant Road, and the Suicide Stairs. Every day in the summer of 1974, 12-year-old Gwendy Peterson has taken the stairs, which are held by strong, if time-rusted, iron bolts and zigzag up the cliffside. At the top of the stairs, Gwendy catches her breath and listens to the shouts of the kids on the playground. From a bit farther away comes the chink of an aluminum bat hitting a baseball as the Senior League kids practice for the Labor Day charity game. One day, a stranger calls to Gwendy. "Hey girl, come on over here for a bit. We ought to palaver, you and me." On a bench in the shade sits a man in black jeans, a black coat like for a suit, and a white shirt unbuttoned at the top. On his head is a small, neat black hat. The time will come when Gwendy has nightmares about that hat. History and background. Gwendy's Button Box was written as a collaborative effort between two authors, Stephen King and Richard Chizmar. According to a conversation between the two authors that was included with the audiobook version of Gwendy's Button Box, King had an unfinished story which he sent to Chizmar to complete. King told Chizmar that he could do whatever he wanted with the story, which was of course an exciting prospect for Chizmar. That's not to say Chizmar was not an accomplished author prior to this collaboration, however. In fact, beyond being a best-selling author, Chizmar is the editor and publisher of Cemetery Dance magazine and the owner of Cemetery Dance Publications. Cemetery Dance has published a number of signed, limited edition King titles and a number of books by the likes of Dean Koontz, Clive Barker, Joe Hill, Mick Garris, and Jack Ketchum, just to name a few. Chizmar and King had a mutual respect and admiration of each other's writing, and having worked together on previous publications, the collaboration came to fruition naturally enough. Following King's admission to Chizmar that he simply didn't know how to conclude this story, Chizmar asked if he could take a crack at it, and King enthusiastically obliged. It's not clear just where King left off and Chizmar picked up the threads of the story, but the transition is seamless enough that the styles of the two authors blend together effortlessly and become one unified voice. The rest, as they say, is history. Power and influence. When Gwendy, at just 12 years old, first encounters the man with the funky hat, he grants, or rather burdens, her with a great deal of power and responsibility. Button Box holds within it an unknowable capacity for destruction and potential for extinction-level devastation, and while it is never fully explained to Gwendy, she understands that she has been entrusted with a great deal more than a bedazzled wooden box. And it is this knowledge of the power the box holds and that she holds as its steward that causes Gwendy to experience occasional bouts of overwhelming temptation and a near constant subconscious pull. She fantasizes about just what would happen if she were to push one of the box's various colorful buttons, and eventually the temptation wins out. And on more than one occasion, she succumbs to the box's allure out of both curiosity and reflexively. And there are, as she knew there would be, consequences, both immediate and unforeseen. There are a number of real-world parallels one could make to Gwendy's efforts to resist and eventually give in to the button box. I was personally reminded of the power that governments hold, and that with just the push of a button they could wipe entire countries, or hell, all of mankind, right off the map. We've all heard about the big red button, right? Well, that's essentially what Gwendy is in possession of. Only the buttons come in a variety of colors which are representative of different continents, and in some cases are far less specific in their catastrophic abilities. And it begs the question, should anyone, be it a government or an individual, be entrusted with power on such a massive scope and scale? Should anyone have the ability to change history with the push of a button? Isn't it scary that the power Gwendy is given in the story is a real power that is in fact held by numerous heads of state the world over? Every cliché in the book. While reading the story, a number of well-worn yet no less meaningful clichés came to mind. A few examples include the tried and true "curiosity killed the cat," and "the road to hell is paved with good intentions," and "too much of a good thing," just to name a few. These sayings and adages are all applicable to the story and play a role to some extent in expressing the moral quandaries that Gwendy finds herself in throughout the story. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, I'm just saying it's all relevant. Curiosity killed the cat. Gwendy's curiosity gets the best of her, regardless of her vague knowledge of some undefined consequences, but regardless of those unforeseen consequences and circumstances, she uses the box again on more than one occasion. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Gwendy means well, or at least means to do no harm, but her actions, as well as her inaction to some extent, seemingly harms others. She comes to find out that she wasn't necessarily at fault for a bizarre tragedy that occurs thousands of miles away, but she doesn't know that until nearly the end of the story, and yet, after believing she may be responsible for killing nearly 1,000 people, she uses the box again. Too much of a good thing. Gwendy comes to rely on the gifts the box holds within it, and she finds it harder and harder to be without them. She also struggles to hide the gifts as they accumulate, but also she is unable to resist the benefits these small gifts grant her, at least initially. However, the gifts and the box itself are a liability in spite of all the good it seems to do for her. Again, this isn't something I intended as a negative criticism of the story. These anecdotes and sayings just happen to find their way into my mind with regularity while reading. There is wisdom and truth to each of these sayings. They're universally known and understood for a good reason. However, in some cases, these cliches and moral lessons are occasionally subverted, which leaves a constant reader such as myself not entirely clear of what the intended message might be. Final thoughts. Gwendy's Button Box is a short, entertaining story that pulled me in right from page 1. The story takes some unexpected turns, especially in the fourth quarter, and I can't help but wonder if that was Chizmar's doing. Not that King is adverse to throwing regular curveballs at the reader, though. Next week I'll be discussing the second of the Gwendy stories, Gwendy's Magic Feather, which was written entirely by Chizmar, so it's not exactly a King story, but the third book Gwendy's final task was another joint effort by King and Chizmar, so in the interest of continuity and closure, I have to cover Gwendy's Magic Feather too, even though Stephen King wasn't involved. New videos drop every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so buckle up for safety and hit the subscriber bell so you get notifications, okay? Goodbye. Be sure to click like and subscribe to the channel for my continued analysis of all things Stephen King, pretty please with blood and guts on top. My name is Mr. Doyle, and this has been a great undertaking.